Empires crumble and kings turn to dust, but some cities give their lives just to be born again from the ashes. From the mud-choked Roman roads of Londinium to the literal hellfire of the Blitz. From the whispers of Shakespeare to the defiant scream of David Bowie. This is more than a capital. It is an anvil where the human spirit is forged in the coldest steel. You think you are saying goodbye to these streets. You're wrong. These stones have been telling the same story for 2,000 years. Devastation, resistance, and eternal rebirth. Brace yourselves, because London's true story begins exactly where it ends. In the ancient dawn, where legends are born from whispers, a small settlement emerged upon the banks of the River Thames. The inhabitants could not have known they were carving the foundations of a titan, a city that would command the destiny of nations and echo forever through the halls of time. This place, born from the mist and murmurs of the old world, would grow to become one of history's most iconic landmarks. Welcome to the Chronicle of London. Long before the suffocating weight of modern steel and glass, there was a world untouched by human hands. London's roots were planted deep in the fertile earth of the Thames, though its true beginnings are lost to the shadows of myth. But history remembers one truth. London's story began with the Iron March of Rome. In 43 AD, the legions of Emperor Claudius breached the shores of Britannia. Among them were engineers bound by a singular purpose, to cast a massive bridge across the dark waters of the Thames. This structure, the first London Bridge, ushered in an era of unimaginable power. Under Roman rule, Londinium breathed and thrived, its streets choked with merchants from every corner of the empire. Yet, beneath this grandeur, a darker tide remained. Over the centuries, the city endured the storms of insurrection. From the vengeful fires of Boudicca's rebellion to the slow decay of Roman dominance, the spirit of London stood firm. Now, as we stand on the edge of memory, let us descend into a land where the past still lingers in the air. This is the birth of a legend. In the summer of 43 AD, the Roman war machine landed under the command of General Aulus Plautius. These were not merely soldiers, but architects of order. They chose a strategic cradle between marsh and forest, birthing the colony of Londinium. Its proximity to the river made it the pulse of commerce for a new era. The heart of the city was the Forum, a marketplace where the empire's wealth was traded and its philosophies debated. Londinium expanded with predatory speed, attracting settlers, artisans, and soldiers. Temples to distant gods and public baths of indulgence dotted the landscape. The bridge, a masterpiece of timber and stone, connected the island to the vast world beyond, cementing the city's status as a central hub of the Roman world. For the elite, life was a flurry of luxury and politics, conducted in lavish homes that overlooked the rising city. But even in this splendor, the threat of blood was never far. In 60 AD, Boudicca, queen of the Iceni, led a storm of tribes that reduced Londinium to ash. The massacre was absolute, yet Londinium rose from the embers, more resilient than before. The city rebuilt itself, emerging stronger through the horrors of war. The legacy of this iron ambition remains etched into the very soil. Even today, the influence of Rome can be felt in the language we speak and the stones beneath our feet. The story of Londinium is an echo of our own struggles, reminding us that the past is always closer than it seems. The shadows of great men loom over these streets. Julius Caesar, born into the Roman aristocracy in 100 BC, set his sights on this distant island mid-century. Though his own expeditions in 55 and 54 BC were plagued by resistance and logistical failure, his ambition laid the framework for all that followed. He planted the seeds of Roman expansion that others would eventually reap. It was Emperor Claudius, often dismissed as a fool by his peers, who finally seized the prize. In 41 AD, he took the throne amidst the chaos of his predecessor's assassination. Seeking to solidify his rule and elevate Rome's glory, he launched the full-scale invasion of 43 AD. As his flags flapped in the salt air, his engineers established the footing on the Thames that would become one of the empire's greatest jewels. Claudius's decision was a watershed moment, opening frontiers of conquest that changed the course of history for generations to come. Although the Emperor Claudius would never set foot within the rising walls of Londinium, his iron legacy lives on. It is etched into the very stone of every monument that bears his name, a silent, eternal reminder that a ruler's vision can forge a reality surviving long after his flesh has rotted. Since the moment its first foundations were struck into the earth, Londinium was destined to be the black heart of Roman commerce. Perched strategically upon the dark, swirling banks of the River Thames, the city gripped the world like a predator. It sat at the intersection of maritime empires and overland conquest, a perfect web for merchants seeking to bleed the wealth of the Roman network. This was the empire's economic engine, a sprawling magnet for every soul drawn to the promise of gold and the shadow of civilization. Wealth did not just flow into Londinium, it flooded the streets like a rising tide. Goods from the sun-scorched depths of Africa, the mysterious reaches of Asia, and the wine-soaked Mediterranean drowned the busy markets in a vibrant, bloody tapestry of culture and greed. In the heart of the city, the Forum was a chaotic arena of ambition. The air here was thick, heavy with the scent of foreign spices and the desperate cries of dealers hawking their wares to a city that never felt satisfied. From exotic silks to the finest potteries of the South, the streets were brimming with the empire's plunder. But beneath this mask of affluence, Londinium had a second, more lethal face. It was not merely a vault of gold, it was a military nightmare. As the nerve center of Roman Britannia, the city functioned as the cold bastion of the legions. It was the staging ground for every operation designed to crush rebellion and preserve the iron order of the emperor. From its formidable stone walls and reinforced earthworks, Roman soldiers watched the river's pulse with unblinking eyes. They controlled the flow of life and death, ensuring that the surrounding wilderness remained under the shadow of Rome. This was the ultimate Roman creed, a symbiotic bond where business and conquest were forged in the same fire. The merchant's prosperity was bought with the soldier's steel. Without the protection of the legions, these markets would have been reduced to ash by the roving tribes of the hinterlands. In turn, the wealth generated by these traders financed the very expeditions that expanded Rome's reach. The empire eventually crumbled, but the city's bones remained buried in the mud. Today, the relics of Londinium stand as a haunting tribute to the ingenuity and cold ambition of its founders. You can find Rome in the architecture that defines our skyline and the very language we use to tell our stories. As we look upon the remains of those ancient fortifications, we must consider how this single spot of earth defined the destiny of a nation. The narrative of Londinium is an echo of our own modern struggles, reminding us that the past is a ghost that never truly leaves the room. As the Roman legions marched across the edges of the known world, they stumbled upon this verdant, mist-shrouded island in the midst of a gray sea. Here, amidst the wreckage of older, forgotten tribes, they laid the cornerstone of a titan. It was a bastion of power and prestige meant to endure for millennia. In the annals of time, there is a narrative of a city that spans the long, dark years. Its very name conjures images of ironclad knights, looming castles, and cathedrals that pierce the heavens. Welcome to medieval London, where the past still lives in the cold cobblestones and the ancient, narrow passageways. Long before the age of monarchs, when the world was a wild tapestry of untamed forest and fog, this town was nestled against the river's edge. It arose from the murmur of the ancient world to become an icon of human history. This is where the true narrative begins. As the last vestiges of Roman light flickered out and the Dark Ages fell like a shroud over Europe, London stood as a lone beacon in the uncertainty. From the skeletal ruins of Roman Londinium, a medieval phoenix emerged. It was guarded by stone and steeped in a new, violent blend of Anglo-Saxon and Norman culture. The old gods were buried to make room for the new. It was a period of tectonic change, where the ruins of one civilization became the foundation of the next. Following the demise of Roman influence, Anglo-Saxon settlers mixed with the survivors of the Old World, forming a vibrant, albeit brutal, new community. Under the rule of kings like Alfred the Great and Edward the Confessor, London thrived once more as a seat of power. But the arrival of William the Conqueror in 1066 altered the city's DNA forever. The construction of the Tower of London was a signal to all. A new master had arrived. Life in medieval London was a landscape of savage contrasts. The Norman aristocracy lived in a flurry of luxury and excess, while the common soul broke their back in the fields and the early workshops. Yet, despite these deep divides, the city became the crossroads of the world. The markets were a fevered dream of activity as merchants from all over Europe flocked to these shores. Guilds rose to power, gripping the economy with an iron hand and dictating the lives of thousands. In 1215, the signing of the Magna Carta offered the nobility their liberties, but it also recognized the undeniable power of London as a center of commerce. This treaty was the bedrock for the city's future growth, preserving its status as a beacon of freedom and a fortress of democracy for centuries to come. As we explore this medieval heart, we find stories of staggering bravery and chilling betrayal. From the hollow majesty of Westminster Abbey to the filth and squalor of the slums, every corner tells a narrative of a time long gone but never forgotten. By the 10th century, London had re-emerged as a suffocating, bustling urban center. Its population grew with every wave of immigration, and its pulse was driven by the trade that poured through its narrow streets. The city was a maze of congested tenements, all huddled within the shadow of the ancient Roman walls. People lived, worked, and died here in a complex web of social duty. The markets were the absolute lifeblood of this existence. From the vast, bloody expanse of Smithfield Market to the tight alleys of Cheapside, the exchange of gold and goods was the only thing that mattered. Merchants came from across the sea to trade ideas and steal on the banks of the Thames. Guilds regulated this chaos, offering protection to their own while keeping a stranglehold on the city's wealth. Religion was the final, inescapable layer of medieval life. The churches and cathedrals that dominated the skyline were monuments to a faith that balanced the brutality of the world. From the towering spires of St. Paul's to the smallest parish, the tolling of the bells and the low chants of monks punctuated every hour of the day. These were not just houses of worship, they were the centers of the community, the places where the living prepared for the dead, and where history lurked around every dark turn. One of the most defining scars upon the face of medieval London was its labyrinth of winding streets, narrow, suffocating lanes that snaked across the earth like a tangled web of shadows. These veins of the city were a feverish swarm of life, echoing with the rhythmic clatter of iron hooves on cold cobblestones and the desperate cries of vendors bloodshot from toil. Yet, beneath the charm of this ancient bustle, a predatory darkness lay in wait. When the sun dipped below the horizon, these alleys became the hunting grounds for cutthroats and thieves, where poverty and crime shook hands in the silence of the night. The Tower of London stood over this chaos as a gloomy sentry, its massive stone ribs casting a long, cold shadow over the Thames. Built by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, it was never meant to be a sanctuary. It was a scream of Norman power made permanent in stone. Though once a royal residence, the fortress quickly surrendered to a darker purpose, earning the name the Bloody Tower. Within these grim walls, political rivals, traitors, and heretics saw their fates sealed in blood. Yet, even in its terror, the tower holds a haunting beauty. The stark Norman architecture of the White Tower stands as a testament to the master builders of old, housing a treasure trove of royal regalia, whose glittering diamonds hide the screams of the past. It is a symbol of endurance, a silent witness to every siege and upheaval that tried to break the spirit of the city. Across the dark waters lies Westminster Abbey, the twin pillar of London's soul. This Gothic marvel has been the beating heart of English faith and power for over a millennium. Since the era of the Conqueror, it has served as the coronation stage where the crown meets the head of the monarch. From the moment one enters its sacred, echoing corridors, the air feels heavy with reverence. The soaring vaulted ceilings and intricate stone arches are a testament to centuries of divine devotion. Here, among the tombs of kings, queens, and poets, the arc of English history is written in marble. It is a living monument to tradition, standing firm through the storms of the Tudor Reformation and the solemn ceremonies of state. Together, the tower and the abbey represent the duality of London, a city forged in both darkness and light, despair and hope. They are unwavering monuments to the indomitable human spirit. As we stand in the shadow of these giants, we hear the footsteps of 1,000 generations echoing down the halls of time, reminding us that the past is a living presence in the heart of all who call this city home. In the pivotal year of 1066, William the Conqueror crossed the English Channel with an army of ironclad knights, driven by a hunger to seize the throne. On a blood-soaked October day, he broke King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings, forever altering the destiny of the island. On Christmas Day, he was crowned in London, turning the city into the capital of a Norman-dominated realm. To crush the embers of rebellion, he raised the Tower of London, a stone fist held over the people. But his conquest was not merely one of swords. He commissioned the Doomsday Book, a chillingly detailed survey of every soul and stone in his kingdom, paving the way for a bureaucracy that would rule for centuries. Centuries later, King Henry VIII ascended to the throne in 1509, inheriting a nation teetering on the edge of internal strife. Henry would use the weight of the crown to shatter the religious landscape of Europe. Frustrated by the Pope's refusal to annul his marriage, he tore England away from the Roman Catholic Church and declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This was a revolution of faith that turned London into a hotbed of theological fire. The dissolution of the monasteries in 1536 saw vast wealth confiscated and poured into the royal coffers, enriching the crown and creating a new, powerful nobility. Henry's mark on the city was also written in grand palaces like St. James and Hampton Court, monuments to his ego and absolute authority. Yet, history remembers him most for the turbulent storm of his personal life. 6 marriages driven by the desperate need for a male heir, leading to divorce, exile, and execution. This narrative of desire and treachery still haunts the English imagination. Both William the Conqueror and Henry VIII were architects of the modern world, transforming a provincial outpost into a thriving metropolis at the core of a rising empire. Their deeds are etched into the spires and bustling streets we walk today, telling us that history is never far away. In the halls of Tudor splendor, amidst the whispers of courtly intrigue, the spirit of London emerged stronger and more resolute, a beacon of hope in a world torn apart by the hunger for power. Step into the blood-soaked and gold-flecked tapestry of Tudor England, a realm where raw power, lethal politics, and desperate human emotion collided to forge the destiny of a nation. In this chapter of our dark journey, we descend into the Tudor Age, a cycle of soaring triumph and crushing turmoil, of unmatched grandeur and violent upheaval that left a permanent scar upon the stones of London and the very soul of English history. From the iron-willed ascension of Henry VII to the glittering, predatory reign of Elizabeth I, the Tudor dynasty stood as a monolith of transformation. This is the heart of a kingdom where rulers commanded with fists of iron concealed in gloves of velvet, holding the fate of millions in a treacherous balance. Join us as we haunt the halls of history, from the gilded, whispering courts of the early monarchs to the plague-shadowed and bustling streets of Elizabethan London. This was an era defined by political backstabbing, religious fire, and an artistic rebirth that rose from the smoke of military conquest. As we embark on this voyage through the Tudor landscape, immerse yourself in the shadows of their success and the echoes of their madness, uncovering the lasting mark this dynasty left upon the world. London's ascent as the political and economic powerhouse of the Tudors was a testament to the city's cold tenacity. By the height of the dynasty, the city had hardened into the nation's throbbing heart, a dark sun attracting aristocrats, desperate merchants, and masters of craft from across the known world. Under the calculated leadership of Henry VII, London breathed with a new, hungry prosperity. The king moved with a hunter's precision, forging bonds with the city's elite guilds and investing in the stone and mortar of a rising empire. Whitehall Palace, a sprawling labyrinth of gardens and administrative shadows, became the ultimate altar of Tudor magnificence. First raised by the ambitious Cardinal Wolsey and later seized and transformed by Henry VIII into a palace of suffocating luxury, it stood as one of Europe's most formidable royal homes. Within its golden halls, the court wielded the blade of statecraft. Here, ambassadors were weighed, justice was dispensed with a heavy hand, and the machinery of government ground forward. The palace galleries were alive with the frantic movement of courtiers, each competing for a scrap of royal favor in a world where a whisper could lead to a title or the executioner's block. As the seat of Tudor authority, London was a maelstrom of intrigue. Ambitious men spun webs of betrayal, while the king's advisors traded secrets in the dark corners of coffee houses and taverns. The streets vibrated with the silent footfalls of spies and crown informants, their eyes fixed on the city's inhabitants. Looming over this paranoia was the Tower of London, a grim reminder of the price of crossing the crown. Beyond politics, Whitehall dictated the very rhythm of Tudor culture. The court's lavish feasts and spectral masks set the standard for aristocratic excess, drawing the finest painters and musicians from across Europe. Playwrights like William Shakespeare and composers like Thomas Tallis found their voices in this crucible, creating masterpieces that still haunt and inspire. Though the physical splendor of Whitehall has succumbed to time, the city's role as the seat of Tudor power remains etched in its marrow. As we walk the winding alleyways of modern London, we hear the echoes of that grandeur in the solemn tolling of bells and the ghosts of courtly secrets. The seeds of a religious firestorm were sown long before the 16th century, fed by a simmering rage against the perceived corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. With the invention of the printing press by Gutenberg, ideas spread like a contagion, laying the framework for a revolution of faith that would ignite under Henry VIII. Frustrated by a pope who would not bend to his will regarding his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry tore England away from Rome, birthing the Church of England with himself as its godlike head. This act of defiance was the spark that transformed London from a bastion of Catholic orthodoxy into a hotbed of Protestant fire. Ancient monasteries, once the silent keepers of piety, were shuttered and desecrated, their gold stolen by the crown and their monks cast into the wilderness. St. Paul's Cathedral was purged, its spires now ringing with the harsh calls of reformers demanding a return to the purity of the scriptures. This Reformation was a seismic shift in the social fabric. The dissolution of the monasteries in the 1530s saw vast territories and riches confiscated, fueling the rise of a new, powerful merchant class and solidifying London as a financial fortress. But this spiritual rebirth was baptized in blood. The execution of martyrs like Thomas More and John Fisher served as a chilling warning to those who remained loyal to the old ways. During the brief reign of the boy king Edward VI, Protestantism tightened its grip, only to be met by the terrifying counterstrike of his sister, Mary I. Her ascension in 1553 brought the Marian persecutions, a dark era where the smoke of burning heretics filled the London air as she sought to drag England back to the Roman fold. Though the theological fires have cooled, the scars of this collision between faith and politics remain deep. As we gaze upon the cathedrals that witnessed this storm, we remember the lives sacrificed in the pursuit of truth. The era met its most devastating end on a fateful September morning in 1666. A small, hungry spark erupted within Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane. Driven by a violent wind and fed by the parched timber structures of the narrow streets, the flame transformed into an unstoppable inferno. The Great Fire of London tore through the heart of the city with the speed of a predator, leaving a blackened trail of ruin where a metropolis once stood. This was the final, scorching act of an age of upheaval, a city consumed by its own growth, waiting to be reborn from the ash. The ravenous flames of 1666 consumed everything: homes, grand shops, and ancient warehouses, forcing a terrified populace to flee as the fire burned with unchecked malice. The iconic spire of St. Paul's Cathedral groaned and collapsed into the inferno, leaving the sacred ground, the bustling markets, and the prestigious guild halls as nothing but glowing heaps of ash. Panic gripped the throat of the city. Every desperate attempt to halt the advance failed. Armed with nothing but primitive tools and a dwindling water supply, the fire raced like a predator through the timber-clung streets. When the smoke finally cleared, 4/5 of the city had been erased, leaving tens of thousands of souls homeless and broken. Yet, from this devastation, a cold resilience emerged. Sir Christopher Wren, a visionary of stone and shadow, drafted a new blueprint for the city. From the skeletal remains of the medieval town, a modern metropolis was born: vast boulevards, grand squares, and structures of magnificent power. The Great Fire was a tragedy of epic proportions, but it served as a brutal force of evolution, converting London into a world-leading example of urban planning and architectural might. History's lens shifts back to a darker morning, May 19, 1536. On the grim stage of Tower Green, within the high walls of the Tower of London, stood Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, colorful, enigmatic, and doomed. She faced the edge of the sword, accused of unforgivable crimes against the crown. Anne's narrative is a haunting spiral of romance, ambition, and ultimate tragedy. Her ascent from a mere lady-in-waiting to the pinnacle of power as queen consort fascinated the nation, but her failure to provide a male heir, coupled with the venom of political intrigue, sealed her fate. Despite her desperate pleas and the absence of true evidence, a jury of her peers condemned her for adultery and treason. Her execution sent a seismic shock through the royal courts of Europe. She was the first queen consort in English history to die by the blade, a terrifying shift in the Tudor landscape. For Henry, this blood was a political necessity, clearing the path for Jane Seymour and the long-awaited heir, Edward VI. It solidified the king's absolute dominance over the soul of the English Church, forever severing the ties with Rome. Now, we move into the smog-choked streets of Victorian London, where the relentless clatter of machinery drowned out the screams of the dispossessed. Amidst this upheaval, the city thrived, feeding on the promise of progress and the intoxicating allure of empire. Step into the age of empire, where nations warred for global domination and exploration tore open new frontiers. In this fourth chapter of our voyage, London stands as the critical architect of world history. Lasting from the 16th to the early 20th century, this era was defined by unprecedented exploration, brutal colonialism, and systemic exploitation. At the center of this web sat London, the metropolis of the British Empire and the cold throne of imperial power. Here, kings' dreams and nations' aspirations collided on a global scale, leaving an everlasting scar on the story of humanity. The Industrial Revolution, ignited in the late 18th century, heralded a new world of mechanization. Steam engines, spinning jennies, and iron looms transformed the nature of creation itself. London was the forge of this revolution. Factories erupted across the skyline, their towering chimneys belching thick, black smoke as they churned out goods at an impossible rate. Textiles, iron, and the black gold of coal fueled a voracious economy, luring thousands from the dying countryside. The city's waterways became commercial arteries, pulsing with raw materials and finished products. This transition shattered the old social fabric. Production moved from the quiet workshops of artisans into massive factories, concentrating thousands of workers under one roof. While it offered the hope of a steady wage, it imposed a hellish reality: terrible working conditions, endless hours, and the exploitation of women and children. The most revolutionary weapon of this age was the railway. The roar of steam locomotives and the glint of iron rails transformed the very concept of distance. London adopted this technology with a feverish intensity. Iron veins ran through the city, connecting the manufacturers to the markets and the ports to the hinterlands. The birth of massive terminuses like Paddington, King's Cross, and Euston altered the landscape forever, allowing the city's reach to creep into the surrounding countryside. The railways permitted an unprecedented mobility of goods and people, creating vast new markets and fueling a population explosion that turned London into a sprawling titan. However, beneath the growth lay a deepening divide. Rapid urbanization birthed overcrowded, impoverished neighborhoods where the working class withered, while the affluent industrialists raised luxurious mansions in Mayfair and Belgravia. This industrial background left a permanent legacy. The skyline is still marked by the relics of chimneys and warehouses, while the trains remain the city's lifeline. Yet, the physical change is mirrored by a social one. The inequities born in this era continue to haunt London, with disparities in wealth and resource access still prevalent today. The smog might have cleared, but the challenges of urbanization and social instability brought forth by the revolution remain. As we reflect on this metamorphosis, we see the terrifying strength of human inventiveness and the heavy price of advancement. The factories that reshaped the geography also reshaped the lives of every citizen, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of London. During the 18th and 19th centuries, London underwent a staggering metamorphosis, a physical expansion that mirrored the boundless hunger of the British Empire. The city's heart beat faster as desperate souls and ambitious dreamers flooded the capital, seeking a scrap of the opportunity promised by the New World Order. This desperate need for sanctuary, combined with the iron arrival of new transportation, birthed elegant neighborhoods on the fringes of the Old World. Mayfair and Kensington, once nothing but silent agricultural pockets and rural retreats, were violently transformed into bastions of the elite. Mayfair, nestled in the dark heart of the West End, rose as a fortress of prestige. Originally conceived in the 17th century as an enclave for the few, it reached its zenith during the Age of Empire. Its streets were lined with grand palaces and exquisite townhouses, monuments of stone designed by the most celebrated architects of the age. Noble families were drawn to this gilded cage, lured by its proximity to the royal court and a social scene that dictated the fate of nations. It was a world of luxury, private clubs, and stylish boutiques, a cosmopolitan arena where artists and intellectuals mingled with the masters of industry. Kensington, to the west, carried a history equally rich and shadowed. Once a quiet retreat for royalty, the construction of Kensington Palace signaled its transformation into a fashionable sanctuary. It became a magnet for the affluent middle class as the 19th century progressed, driven by the expansion of the iron rails and the wealth of global trade. Elegant garden squares and terrace residences sprouted across the district, catering to the aspirations of a rising generation. Kensington became a beacon of cultural sophistication, with museums, libraries, and galleries forming a labyrinth of intellectual pursuit. Even today, These neighborhoods remain symbols of an era of unrivaled wealth and privilege. Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens provide a green, silent respite from the city's relentless pulse. Yet the legacy of these districts is one of power and cultural dominance. They are the emblems of London's success, reminding us that even as the empire faded, its monuments of money and influence remain unyielding against the passage of time. In 1837, an 18-year-old girl ascended the throne, beginning a 6-decade reign that would define an entire epoch. Queen Victoria oversaw a transformation of the globe that was as brutal as it was magnificent. Under her unblinking gaze, the British Empire reached its absolute pinnacle, stretching its cold fingers across every continent and ruling over a fifth of all human life. London, the Iron Throne of this empire, thrived as the world's commercial and cultural furnace. It became a global crossroads, its streets thick with immigrants from the furthest reaches of the earth, each adding their own thread to its international tapestry. Yet, beneath the surface of Victorian grandeur, a war for the future was being waged. This was the era of the Industrial Revolution, of urban rot, and the desperate fight for workers' rights and women's suffrage. Through the turbulence, Victoria remained a persistent icon of stability, a silent sentinel of continuity. Science, technology, and the arts exploded in this crucible. The Great Exhibition of 1851 in Hyde Park was a celebration of this industrial soul, while literary giants like Charles Dickens and Oscar Wilde captured the city's darker, beating heart. Her death in 1901 was the death of an era, but her image, etched on coins and stamps, became a permanent ghost of perseverance. Decades later, another giant of London was born, Winston Churchill. A staunch politician and wartime commander, his career spanned over half a century of global fire. Churchill's leadership during World War II remains his most towering and haunted legacy. From 1940 to 1945, he led a nation through its darkest hour with a conviction that bordered on the fanatical. His voice, rasping with defiance, encouraged a people to stand firm against the creeping shadow of Nazi dictatorship. His strategic collaboration with Roosevelt and Stalin shaped the very architecture of the post-war world. Iconic speeches, The Finest Hour and The Fight on the Beaches, became the soundtrack of British resilience. But Churchill was more than a warlord. He was a writer and historian whose memoirs provide a chillingly insightful look into the complexities of human leadership and the fragility of peace. As Prime Minister, he oversaw the recovery of a broken economy and the eventual decolonization of the very empire Victoria had expanded. He helped lay the foundations for the UN and NATO, attempting to build a wall against future disasters. Today, monuments and plaques throughout London honor his memory, a reminder of his own words. We make a life by what we give. As we reflect on these towering figures, Victoria and Churchill, we see the icons of an age defined by grit and tenacity. Their influence reshaped the fate of nations and left an indelible mark on the stones of the capital. Beneath the modern glare of neon lights and the relentless hum of traffic, the city still pulses with the life they helped forge. In the sprawling metropolis of modern London, the dreams of millions converge, intertwining in a tapestry of ambition and aspiration that stretches back to the ruins of Rome and forward into an uncertain future. Welcome to the 5th chapter of our journey, a descent into the furnace of courage, conflict, and the iron resilience of the soul. In this chapter, we witness how the twin shadows of war and instability clawed at the throat of London. Conflict has always been a ruthless architect of human history, tearing down national destinies and leaving an eternal, charred impression upon the urban landscape. With its strategic heartbeat and vibrant spirit, London was never immune to the ravages of the storm. From the skeletal remains of World War II to the silent tenacity of the Blitz, the city has stared into the abyss of total destruction, emerging stronger and more lethal each time the smoke cleared. Here, we look at the courage of those who lived through the impossible. From the mud-choked trenches of the Great War to the screaming air raids of the Second, we honor the sacrifice of the common soul. We see how Londoners fused together in the face of hardship, proving that community is the only armor that holds when disaster strikes. Join us as we walk through a history written in ash and reborn in stone. For London's story is the ultimate testament to the human spirit's refusal to break. From the funeral pyre of destruction, the phoenix rises. When the world ignited in 1914, Europe was swept into a black tornado of bloodshed. London, the epicenter of the empire, became a frantic hive of military hunger. Hospitals, barracks, and weapons factories erupted from the earth to feed the front lines where the young went to die. Yet, distance offered no sanctuary. The silent, predatory shapes of German Zeppelins and Gotha bombers haunted the night skies, raining terror upon railway stations and government halls. These raids birthed a new age of civilian misery, a psychological warfare that turned the East End into a graveyard of timber and brick. The night of May 31st, 1915, remains etched in blood, the first Blitz, a precursor to a nightmare that would return with even greater fury. Beyond the bombs, the city withered under the weight of rationing. Food became a ghost, prices clawed at the ceiling, and the economy bled out. Londoners learned the cold language of scarcity, an equal distribution of misery that tested the very fabric of their resolve. In 1939, the darkness returned, unleashing a wave of carnage that threatened to erase London from the map. During the Blitz, as the Luftwaffe pummeled the city night after night, the underground stations became the beating, crowded heart of survival. From September 1940 to May 1941, the city endured a relentless 9-month crucifixion of high explosives and incendiary fire. Landmarks that had stood for centuries, St. Paul's, the Houses of Parliament, were licked by flames, and entire neighborhoods were reduced to dust. Yet, amidst the ruins, a terrifying solidarity was born. Neighbors shared their last scraps of bread and shelter in a defiance that no bomb could shatter. The spirit of the Blitz, ignited by Winston Churchill's iron-willed call to keep calm and carry on, became the national anthem of survival. Despite the austerity, the hunger, and the cold, Londoners stood fast, refusing to be intimidated by the forces of death. The scars of these wars may have faded into the gray architecture of the modern day, but the memory lingers in the collective consciousness, a haunting reminder of what was sacrificed. London emerged from the smoke not just as a city, but as a monument to tenacity. The conflict scars are still visible if you know where to look, serving as silent sentinels over the future. As the summer of 1940 began, the shadow of invasion loomed like a predator across the Channel. With France broken, Nazi Germany turned its eyes toward the final stronghold of resistance. The rumble of bombers became the soundtrack of the night, a palpable existential peril. Yet, from the dockworkers of the Thames to the merchants of the East End, the city braced for the storm, ready to defend its way of life from the grip of tyranny. September 7, 1940, marked the beginning of the end for the old world. Wave after wave of bombers rained death from the heavens, sparing no corner of the capital. Yet, as the air grew thick with the ash of burning homes, the spirit of London remained unbowed. Ordinary people crawled from the wreckage to pull their neighbors from the mouth of death, while firefighters fought the infernos with a courage that defied logic. High above, in the cold air, the RAF engaged in a desperate dance for supremacy. Spitfires and hurricanes roared against the Luftwaffe, their dogfights deciding the fate of Western civilization. Through sheer tactics and in refusal to yield, the RAF blunted the onslaught, turning the skies into a graveyard for the enemy. Throughout the darkest nights of the Blitz, London refused to surrender to despair. From the rubble-strewn alleys to the majestic halls of Buckingham Palace, a wall of unity was built. Churchill's voice echoed through the ruins. we shall never surrender. Life, impossibly, continued. Theaters and restaurants stayed open, fragile bubbles of hope in a world torn by war. When the smoke finally drifted away, London emerged bruised, bloodied, but unbowed. The streets were littered with the bones of buildings, but the heart of the city was intact. Today, the memorials stand as quiet witnesses to that grit, reminding us that no matter the obstacle, the resolve that carried London through its darkest days will always prevail. As we reflect on London's role as a beacon of hope and defiance during the Battle of Britain, we must honor the ghosts of those who stood in the fire. Their grit in the face of total annihilation reminds us that the human spirit is an unyielding force, capable of overcoming the most formidable shadows. During the blackest days of the Blitz, St. Paul's Cathedral was a singular light amidst the chaos and mechanical destruction. Its massive dome, a silent guardian of the London skyline, represented a defiant middle finger to the darkness. However, as the Luftwaffe rained fire upon the city, the cathedral became a primary target. Its ancient, sacred stones shuddered with the visceral intensity of the blasts. The roof was the first to surrender to the heat, its massive timber beams blazing like brittle matchsticks as incendiary bombs fell from the heavens. Firefighters fought with a heroism that bordered on the divine, focusing their hoses on the inferno while black smoke choked the night sky. But for a moment, the fire seemed absolute, and as the dust settled, the city looked upon a ruin that felt like a blow to its very soul. Yet, from this devastation, a cold, hard determination arose to restore this icon to its former, haunting beauty. Led by visionary architects and planners, the post-war reconstruction was more than just a building project. It was a physical manifestation of the people's ambition. Despite the scars of the Blitz, St. Paul's was deemed structurally sound, a survivor worthy of rebirth. A legion of craftsmen and stonemasons was recruited, utilizing ancient methods to meticulously replace the broken stone and replicate the elaborate wood carvings that matched the cathedral's original, majestic form. The renowned dome, severely wounded by the war, was painstakingly repaired and fortified, ensuring it would stand as a symbol of hope for generations yet unborn. Finally, in 1960, more than 15 years after the echoes of war faded, St. Paul's reopened its doors, a triumph of human perseverance and a testament to the undying spirit of London. Today, it remains a beacon of light in times of darkness, a reminder that even after the most formidable tragedy, there is always the chance for renewal. Now we step away from the smoke of war and into the flickering glow of candlelight and the strains of Elizabethan music. A playwright takes to the stage, his words igniting the imaginations of a world hungry for inspiration. From the theaters of Shakespeare to the grand galleries of the Royal Academy, London blossomed into a cultural mecca, a beacon of artistic brilliance. This was the Cultural Renaissance, a historical period where creativity, intellect, and raw ingenuity converged to explore the human condition. Spanning from the 14th to the 17th century, this era was a violent emergence from the shadows of the medieval period. Europe saw a feverish resurgence of interest in the arts, science, and philosophy. In London, this revolution found fertile ground, leaving an indelible mark on the trajectory of Western civilization. From the bustling, filthy streets of the theater districts to the revolutionary pages produced by the newly developed press, the Renaissance encourages us to explore the absolute pinnacles of human achievement and the depths of our own imagination. Fast forward through the centuries to the 1960s, where a seismic upheaval shattered the world of fashion and culture. In London, the classic, rigid styles of the past gave way to striking, avant-garde creations that redefined the very essence of style. Mary Quant led this fashion revolution with designs that captured the restless spirit of a new generation. Her mini-skirts and geometric patterns became synonymous with the swinging 60s, an era where young women discovered a dangerous sense of freedom and self-expression. Alongside Quant, icons like Vivienne Westwood and Barbara Hulanicki pushed the frontiers of the acceptable, experimenting with bold silhouettes and provocative materials. The stores on Carnaby Street and King's Road became the holy centers of this revolution, attracting a swarm of trendsetters and celebrities eager to make their mark on a world that was rapidly changing. As London embraced these daring trends, it also became a furnace of musical creativity. From the raw, primal energy of rock and roll to the deep, soul-stirring sounds of Motown, the music of the 60s resonated through every club and alleyway. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Who were the high priests of this musical revolution, their chart-topping anthems captivating millions across the globe. Yet, the scene was more than just rock. The city embraced the smoky sounds of jazz, blues, and the mind-bending patterns of psychedelic rock. Legendary venues like the Marquee Club and the Roundhouse became incubators for a wide range of talent that would define the soundtrack of a century. In this era, art also saw a violent resurgence. Figures like David Hockney and Bridget Riley pushed the boundaries of traditional forms, adopting the vibrant, colorful compositions of pop art to challenge old ideals of beauty. Works like Hockney's A Bigger Splash became iconic emblems of the energy and excitement of the time. Museums and galleries like the Tate and the Victoria and Albert hosted groundbreaking exhibits, fostering a community of collaboration that drove the era's creative spirit to impossible new heights. As the neon delirium of the swinging 60s bled into the gritty dawn of the 1970s, the memory of that vibrant decade did not fade. It mutated. The fashion, music, and art of that era left a jagged, unforgettable impression on London, defining its identity for the centuries to follow. The spirit of the 60s, rooted in a violent rejection of the status quo, is the phantom limb of modern London. You can feel it in the eccentric street styles of Camden Market and see its pulse in the avant-garde galleries of Shoreditch. Within this complex tapestry, certain luminaries emerged as gods of the cultural landscape: the Beatles, David Bowie, and Vivienne Westwood. These visionaries did not just create, they revolutionized, leaving legacies that still vibrate in the hearts of millions. The Beatles were the quintessential pioneers of this cultural rebirth. From the sweat-soaked bars of Hamburg to a sudden, global superstardom, they tore down the walls of tradition with a revolutionary sonic architecture. Hits like Hey Jude and Let It Be became the psalms of a generation. But the Beatles were more than a band, they were cultural architects. They embraced experimentation with a hunger that altered social norms and opened the gates for a new era of unbridled self-expression. Yet, few stars burned with the chameleon-like intensity of David Bowie. His career was a masterclass in the power of reinvention, from the modfolk singer to the alien messiah, Ziggy Stardust. With Heroes and the Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, Bowie fused genres with a reckless, beautiful abandon. His androgynous image and gender-bending visuals shattered traditional concepts of masculinity and femininity, commanding a new generation to value fluidity and the art of the mask. While Bowie conquered the airwaves, Vivienne Westwood seized the streets. A renegade designer with a soul forged in rebellion, she reshaped British fashion by weaponizing the aesthetic of the discarded. From her infamous Sex boutique on King's Road to the global runways, Westwood's work was a collision of punk, fetishism, and historical costume. She didn't just design clothes, she launched a frontal assault on the establishment. Her devotion to self-expression turned fashion into a potent tool for social change, proving that a safety pin and a corset could be as revolutionary as a protest march. These icons remind us that creativity is not just a form of beauty, it is a transformative power that dictates how we see the world. But the roots of this brilliance reach back further, into the towering shadows of Tudor and Victorian London. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, the city emerged as a beacon of literary genius. William Shakespeare, born in 1564, rose from obscurity to become the most acclaimed architect of the human soul. The Globe Theatre, perched on the banks of the Thames, was the pulsing heart of this theatrical golden age. Amidst the heavy scent of ale and the rustle of silk, audiences were transported to magical realms, forced to confront the mysteries of existence through Shakespeare's poetic complexity. From the tragic romance of Romeo and Juliet to the haunted corridors of Hamlet, his works delved into the depths of power and mortality with an unrivaled ferocity. By the 19th century, London's literary landscape underwent a dark metamorphosis. Charles Dickens emerged as the preeminent chronicler of the Victorian soul, capturing the city's beauty and its rotting contradictions. His novels, from the starving slums of Oliver Twist to the chilling ghosts of A Christmas Carol, shone a harsh, unforgiving light on the socio-economic injustices of his time. Dickens was not alone in this examination. The Brontes, George Eliot, and Thomas Hardy each added their unique, often somber perspectives to the literary canon. These stories were more than ink on paper. They were the voices of a city struggling to find its conscience amidst industrial chaos. The spirit of this cultural renaissance lives on in the London of today, where bookstores and theaters still thrive as sanctuaries for new, daring voices. From the laughter of a comedy to the crushing weight of a tragedy, the narratives of London's past remind us of the timeless power of storytelling to reveal the human experience. Today, in the shadow of towering glass skyscrapers and ancient, soot-stained monuments, the city stands on the brink of a new era. As London evolves to meet the challenges of the 21st century, the echoes of its past, the resilience, the tenacity, and the unyielding brilliance reverberate through its streets, a haunting reminder that while empires fall and kings perish, the story of London is eternal. As we reach the final crossroads of our journey, the past and present collide in a violent spark of possibility. In this concluding chapter, we chart London's ascent from its skeletal beginnings to the titanium and glass titan it is today. London, a city of jagged contrasts and beautiful contradictions, has forever existed in a state of perpetual fever. From its birth as a Roman outpost to its evolution into a global financial fortress, it has weathered the storms of history and emerged not just intact, but refined. We reflect now on the forces that carved this city's soul, from the political bloodletting of the Tudor period to the industrial furnace that propelled London into the modern age. This is a story of resilience, adaptation, and a promise that knows no limit. The saga began in 43 AD, when the Romans drove their stakes into the banks of the Thames, christening the settlement Londinium. What was once a strategic crossing point rapidly mutated into a commercial nerve center, connected by a network of iron straight roads to the heart of the Roman Empire. The rising of the Roman wall and the dark, subterranean temple of Mithras laid the foundation for a prosperity that would endure for millennia. By the medieval period, London had become the political and economic heart of England. The Norman conquest of 1066 brought a new architecture of power. The Tower of London and Westminster Abbey rose like stone sentinels, securing the city's place as the seat of the throne. It was an era of guilds, markets, and the Magna Carta, the moment the rule of law was first etched into the city's bones. The Tudor era followed as a time of unprecedented upheaval and gilded growth. Under the shadows of Henry VIII and the brilliance of Elizabeth I, London thrived as a hub of global trade and cultural innovation. The Globe Theatre and the first iterations of St. Paul's Cathedral signaled the city's rise as a worldwide capital, even as the English Reformation tore through the country's religious landscape. Then came the Industrial Revolution, a seismic shift driven by steam, coal, and the relentless grinding of gears. Factories and mills erupted across the cityscape, sparking a massive urbanization that saw millions flood into the streets for a scrap of opportunity. Railways and bridges remapped the horizon, setting the stage for the world we inhabit today. Yet, this progress was mirrored by deep Victorian tension. While the elite relished a life of leisure, the working class survived in the rotting slums, a plight captured with surgical precision by writers like Charles Dickens and George Eliot. The 20th century brought both the highest triumphs and the deepest sorrows. London endured the fire of 2 world wars, emerging from the debris of the Blitz as a global superpower. The bombings left permanent scars on the city's skin, but the spirit of the Londoner remained unyielding. Following the smoke of war, a period of rebirth and reconstruction began, fueled by new technologies and a shifting economy that transformed London from an industrial furnace into a digital and financial lighthouse. London's endurance is best witnessed in its recovery from catastrophe. The Great Fire of 1666 reduced the city to ash, yet Londoners banded together to rebuild a metropolis that became the envy of the world. In World War II, they resisted the oppression of fascism from the ruins of their own homes. This ability to welcome innovation while honoring the ancient has been the city's ultimate survival mechanism. Today, London's greatest strength lies in its diversity, a melting pot of languages, cultures, and traditions that has existed since its Roman inception. This cosmopolitan heartbeat is reflected in the city's art, its music, and its very identity. As we look toward the horizon of the 21st century, London stands at a new crossroads, facing the uncertainties of climate change and the disruptions of a technological revolution. Yet, there is a fierce cause for optimism. The eternal spirit of this city, forged in the fires of resilience and adaptation, is as lethal and vibrant as ever. As we bid farewell to the streets that have been our companions, remember that London's narrative is far from finished. It is a story of creativity and limitless promise unfolding day by day. While empires may fall and kings may perish, the story of London remains eternal, a beacon of hope blazing through the storms of change. As we bid a final farewell to the city that has been our shadow and our guide, let us carry the lessons of perseverance, iron flexibility, and the vast inclusivity that London has etched into our souls. Let these lessons be your armor as you walk into the unknown, certain that, like London, you possess the courage to conquer any shadow that rises in your path. We have reached the edge of our voyage through time, standing before a rich, blood-stained, and gold-leaf tapestry of stories that define this immortal metropolis. From the towering, skeletal spires of its ancient churches to the twisting, claustrophobic lanes of neighborhoods that have seen centuries of secrets, London is a living witness to the human drama. In the heavy shadow of the Tower of London or the hallowed, silent halls of Westminster Abbey, one cannot help but feel the weight of ghosts, the architects, the prisoners, and the kings who once breathed within these stones. Whether you are tracing the jagged Roman ruins of Londinium or standing upon the medieval engineering of Tower Bridge, you are not merely a tourist. You are a time traveler, experiencing the city's pulse firsthand. Beyond its stone and mortar, London's cultural cathedrals stand as monuments to human ingenuity. The British Museum, a vault of global treasures, whispers of the empire's reach, while the Victoria and Albert Museum showcases the feverish invention of human civilization. And then there is the Globe, a replica of Shakespeare's original sanctuary, where the air still seems to vibrate with the echoes of the Elizabethan Golden Age. Yet, London does not only look backward. The skyline is a jagged crown of modern marvels, from the needle-like defiance of the Shard to the elegant, sweeping lines of the Millennium Bridge. The silhouette of the London Eye and the industrial-turned-artistic halls of the Tate Modern are testament to a city that refuses to stop reinventing itself. Every alleyway in Soho, every footstep on the South Bank offers a choice: to remain in the present or to uncover a hidden gem from a forgotten century. To those inspired by the stories we have resurrected and the places we have walked, we say, go forth. London awaits with its historic scars and its neon futures. There is no other city on this earth that balances the weight of the past with the momentum of the future so violently and beautifully. Thank you for joining us on this incredible descent through London's history. From the ancient Roman mud of Londinium to the glass and steel canyons of the 21st century, we have watched empires ebb and flow and kings rise and fall in the relentless march of progress. London has been a crucible of human endeavor, a melting pot where cultures and ideas collide to create something immortal. But remember, the adventure does not end here. London continues to evolve, adapting to the challenges of a new age. There are still secrets buried beneath the financial sector's skyscrapers and stories waiting to be told in the bustling heart of East London. We ask you to keep exploring, to venture into the hidden nooks and forgotten alleyways where the mysteries still linger. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more dark and intriguing insights into the world's most iconic cities. Until the next time, keep exploring, discovering, and dreaming. The spirit of London, though ever-changing, is ageless, a beacon of hope in an uncertain world. May your own journeys be as rich and as haunting as the history of London.